Hey, everybody. We're going to talk about getting a job today, a tenure track job, when to apply, how to know you're ready to apply, and then what kind of different jobs there are out there. So we're going to talk about a couple different things today. So, I'm getting ready to go to work. I have my job, I have my coffee. We're going to talk about these really important things that your advisor likely does tell you and does explain these things to you very well. But I'm just going to give you a few additional things to consider as you are deciding when to apply for a job and which type of job you want or are ready for. And this can get a little bit tricky, and we're going to need a little bit of math maybe too. So let's get started. All right. Let's dive in. First, let's talk about what is a tenure track position. So a tenure track position is a path toward permanence at your job or semi-permanence at your job. So it typically involves three strands: teaching, research, and over the course of 5 to 6 years, typically 6 years, you're practicing, developing, and proving your growth in those three areas. So it's expected that you come to the teaching position as an early career person or with limited experience, teaching a full course load and running your own research and developing service projects. It's expected that you're coming in needing some mentorship and support. And they expect that with support and time over 6 years, you'll be able to do those things and then be granted tenure. So tenure track means that you're developing a relationship with the place and space and people toward a full-time, long-lasting professorship. So you start at assistant professor, and then by year 6, starting year 7, you might be associate professor, and then you could be associate professor for any number of years before you apply for a full professorship. So we'll do another video on that. So that's just like the basic part of it. And now we need to break down the different types of jobs. All right, so let's talk about the different configurations when it comes to having a tenure track position. First, it can be 2 by 2. Okay, I need a better marker, hang on. Okay, 2 by 2. 2 by 2. Can you see it? Okay, and then there's 3 by 3 and 4 by 4, or any number of configurations of these. So what is the deal with these? Okay, so the key is this. If you are 2 by 2, it means that your university thinks that your teaching, these are teaching configurations, that your teaching is half of every semester, your load, half of your load, which means if I teach 2 classes, that's like 50% of my time in a semester, and that leaves 50% of my other time to do other things, such as research and service. My current position is 50% teaching, 40% research, and 10% service. So it means that teaching is the most important, but then second is research and third is service. Does that make sense? Are you with me? Okay, so that's a 2 by 2. It's a typical tenure track research type of job. So half of my time is teaching, 50%, 40% research, 10% service. So basically, it's not really 40 hours a week. It's really just thinking about how your time is allocated and how your pay is allocated. So that's very typical for a Research 1 university. So if you think about this as a K-12 teacher, you're used to teaching all day, every day, 8 to 4, 8 to 3, something like that. This is very different. You might teach, for me, I teach Monday nights, Tuesday nights, 2 3-hour classes. So 3-hour classes is a lot to prep for. It's half a school day sometimes, as that's how I kind of thought about it. I typically taught 6 classes a day when I was teaching junior high. And now I'm teaching, so 6 classes, 15 minutes each, roughly 6 hours of class instruction. So now I'm teaching half that, 2 days a week. Lots of preparation, more intense content stuff, more mentoring with the students. I also advise graduate students and doctoral students, and that all counts pretty much as my teaching load as well. And then I spend much of my time researching. So if you're getting it 2 by 2, it means you're not spending a ton of time in the classroom teaching. You're going to teach 2 classes each semester. Are you with me? All right. If you're 3 by 3, that's more like 75% of your time every semester is focused on teaching. So you're going to teach 3 classes every semester, which could be across the whole week or 3 nights a week or a combination of a night class and day class. It might mean you're teaching an online class, synchronous or asynchronous, any number of those things. Great. But it means your research load is probably smaller, or you have a service load. So they might be asking you to take up like a national writing project site or a big grant, or to help with some administrative work. So you might be negotiating something else in there. It's very rare that you just teach 3 classes every semester and don't have any other responsibilities. Okay. And 4 by 4 is primarily going to be a full-time teaching, tenure track teaching position. So this means that you're teaching 4 classes a semester. It's a full load. You probably are not asked to do a lot of other things. You might be on a couple committees. You might be doing research and writing articles, but it's not actually required as part of your commitment. You might be just doing that for your own personal development. So that's an important piece of it too. Now, when I was looking for my position, so we're thinking about applying for jobs or reading job calls, when I was ready to make the move from K-12 to higher ed, I really did consider 4 by 4. I really enjoy teaching. I'm teaching undergrads or graduate students. But this is kind of a lateral move for me. When I was teaching junior high, I taught 6 classes a day, as I said, and this 4 by 4 would be teaching full time. I might have 3 or 4 classes a day that I'm attending to, or teaching 4 nights a week. That's a pretty busy load, and typically, especially if you've been teaching for a long time, moving into a tenure track position is typically a pay cut for someone who's been teaching in public school for a long time. So I was not willing to take a big pay cut to have sort of the same kind of teaching load as I had in junior high. I was looking for something more flexible. So I was looking at job calls that had 2 by 2 or 3 by 2 or some sort of combination of them. And I should say, the other thing is that sometimes you might have a tenure track job that's 2-1. And if you've done a lot of great research and have a lot of projects going on, they might make it just 1 class that you have to teach one of the semesters because you've been so productive with your research, and they want to give you a little bit more time and honor that you're spending a lot of time doing that research and that writing. So those kinds of things really fluctuate. So I'm going to say, when you're thinking about applying for a tenure track job, I encourage you to think about what kind of career you might want to have. Now, the truth is, you don't have to stay there for 6 or 7 years. You might start at a 3 by 3 or a 4 by 4 for 1 or 2 years, and then look for a different job. That's a 2 by 2. Okay. And now we have to get into why that might be. All right. This is going to get really serious. All right, so let's look at a few job calls. So I don't really know what this meant exactly. I was just like, job openings or something along those lines. But basically, when I started looking for a teaching job, which is basically every year I go and look and see if something's available. I would search for, English education or teacher education and see what came up. If something came up locally and they were looking for adjunct professors, or something came up in another state and it was a tenure track, and I might imagine moving across the country for this job, any number of those things, which would have been great. So this is just like searching up anything. You would look for, job openings and would put in key terms and things like that, right? But I think understanding how to read these job calls in light of what I told you about these 223344, they don't always say this in the job call. You kind of have to know what to look for when you're reading them, and kind of read between the lines to see what in fact they're asking and what in fact this job means. And then of course, if you have an interview or you can follow up and ask some questions, you can say, what's the teaching load? Is the teaching load 223344? But chances are, depending on the job call, you'll have a sense of what that might mean. So let's take a look at a few job calls and I'll talk you through how you might want to read them. Okay, so here's one at NC State University. So one of the things is that this is probably, I don't know offhand, and you may not know, but you might search it up, that this is probably an R1 or R2, more likely an R1 university. So what that means is it's probably going to be like a 2-2 or 3-2 or 3-3 teaching load, because they're going to want you to do some research or have some sort of big service grant type thing. But you don't have to know that right away. You might look at this. So this is assistant or associate professor. So they might be looking for someone who's early career or someone who already has tenure and is looking to change schools. So that's kind of a key. If it's assistant or associate, that they probably are looking for someone with an established research record. So you can read about the university, and that's really important to do. But let's just kind of get to the essential job duties. So this is in teacher education, which is probably what you've been preparing for if you're K-12 teacher in your PhD program, or you already have your PhD, you probably was teacher education, maybe not. And this is in the area of English language arts, so this might be great. And it's focused on middle school ELA pre-service teacher education. So this essential job duties say that you're going to teach middle grades ELA methods courses and advise and undergraduates and mentor doctoral students. If you are mentoring doctoral students or at a university that has doctoral students, it's likely in research, so you're likely also expected to do research, which means you probably do not have a 4-4 teaching load. It's probably something more like 2-2, maybe even 2-1, and that they're seeking an advanced assistant or associate professor who can be a part of this middle grades, English language arts, and social studies program. So they're actually looking for maybe interdisciplinary work. So you can read a little bit more about this, but then here's some other responsibilities. Establish and maintain scholarly research, publication, and grant writing record. So this means that there is a lot of research, and it says research university, very high research activity. It is very clear that that is a priority for this position. So if you are looking to do research and spend a lot of time doing qualitative research or research, you plan on having a big grant where you can work with teachers and really shape the field nationally, internationally, even locally, then that's where your time is going to be spent, and then teaching is going to be a small load. But they still want you to be involved in the pre-service teacher courses and in mentoring. Okay, so those are all, and that's a lot to balance, and this is going to be a big job. Like I would say, and like I would be, a little intimidated, but I would have questions about mentoring. You have some supports to help with program development and all those kinds of things. Okay, so there's a lot here with this position for sure. Get a sense as you read it that it's not necessarily, this is not going to be a 4-4 kind of like heavy teaching job. And those are the things that you might look for. Let's see if there's any. It says 9 months, so it's a 9-month position, which means you're off contract probably in the summer. Okay, so there's just a couple things that you can, and you know who to contact with questions. All right, so yeah, so that's one way of looking at this job, or this job call, that's what we call it, job call. Now let's take a look at another job call. Okay, so this job call is Southwestern Oklahoma State University. You can see right away the title is instructor or assistant professor of English. So this is probably not going to be tenure track. It might be, but probably not, and probably also not involve research. I can just tell if it's instructor, typically the word instructor is a sign that there's going to be a teaching emphasis. So this is probably going to be a 4-4 or 3-3 type job, and it might have some administrative responsibilities as well. So this is similar on language arts and literature. So this in English and not necessarily in English education. So that's something to think about. This is in the Department of Language and Literature. These are the English courses that you would teach. It tells you your salary. And here it says responsible for teaching assignments, office hours, grade alert systems, student outcomes, departmental assessment, advising students, and continuing professional development. This is kind of nice because it probably signals that there's going to be something for you to attend conferences and attend professional development. They're going to help you with your teaching. And so that's, yeah, and there's some service involved here with involved in working with students, but it doesn't have any mention about research. So this is not a research type job, and that might not be what you want. You may not want a research type job. You might want a more of a teaching load type job. So again, this doesn't say 4-4 or 3-3, but that would be one of my questions if I were up to get a sense of how much time, how many classes am I teaching each semester, how much time is allocated toward doing that advising or any departmental work that might be necessary. So lots to think about with these. Okay, so we took a look at two job calls. That one is tenure, doesn't look like it's tenure track. One included the salary that I was able to point out when I was quickly skimming. And I want to look at one more because I think there's also something to consider when you're looking at job calls about whether or not you're willing to relocate, but also how the salary fits your needs, your family, uh, and what it means to live if you're going to relocate. So I'm going to share one more with you. All right, so here's one, assistant rank faculty, English language arts at Stanford. Now, I want to just say a few things about this university. When I was looking for my teaching job, I lived in Chicago at the time as a junior high teacher, as you know, and I was looking to see what kind of positions opened. And in particular, I wanted an English education. So I wanted to be a teacher of future English language arts teachers in middle and high school. These positions don't come up all that often, but right now there's at least two tenure track English education positions open, one at NC State, this one here at Stanford. These are two viable options, North Carolina, California. Now, for me, when I was thinking about this and I had to bring my partner involved, my partner was part of the conversation, there were some jobs in various East Coast states, New York and Maine. And my partner and I had a conversation, do we want to relocate? If we're going to change our whole environment and relocate, do we want to relocate to a place that's as cold, if not colder than Chicago? The answer was no. We did not want to do a lot more shoveling. We didn't want to do, if we could avoid ever shoveling again, that's what we would do. And so he kind of said, like, there's no way I'm going anywhere colder than Chicago. And so right away, those jobs came, like, I stopped looking at those jobs. I stopped applying to those jobs. So anyway, we were looking places that were warmer. Then we looked at California, and I really want to go to California. As you know, I also love beach volleyball and I love warm weather and I love beach. But here's the thing. On my salary in Chicago, and what our house was worth, we could not relocate and live in California in the kind of lifestyle that we were accustomed to. We would be living in a shoebox, and the pay, while it might be really great, would also not necessarily be commensurate with the cost of living there. So I just want to show you, because this is really fascinating to me. I'm just scrolling down. This is a great university. It's very prestigious. It has wonderful colleagues there. We have wonderful colleagues there. It's fantastic. But here is the base salary, 140,000 to 153,000. This is way, way more than I make now. It is way more than I would have ever made as a classroom teacher. But the thing is, living in California and the housing costs and living costs in California would not be something that we could also afford. Now, it might be for you. And so this is really important to contact the person who, okay, I'm going to stop sharing here. It's important to contact the person whoever's the contact person for that job, and reach out and ask those questions. Like, what is it like to live there? What is the cost of living? When you went to work there, did they offer you a moving package, like a package to like money to move and to relocate for movers and that sort of thing? What are the housing costs? What are the living costs? It's really important to think about these things too. So you might be thrilled that there's this job opportunity, and then you find out how much they pay, and that also might be awesome too. But then also you have to look at the cost of living where you are. So this was a really important thing for me because we were in California. Moving to Oklahoma, the cost of living was a little bit better, actually a lot better. So we were able to sell our home in Oklahoma and Chicago, move to Oklahoma, and have a pretty commensurate, if not better, life quality of life than we had in Chicago because the cost of living here in Oklahoma was so much more reasonable. All right, so let's review what to look for call. So the teaching load, it may clearly the teaching load in the job description, but there might be some reading between the lines that you have to do to figure out whether or not it's a heavy teaching load or a light teaching load, and what the research expectations are. So what are the teaching expectations? What's the research expectations? So we saw in the NC State, it had the word very, very. So the research expectations, they should be detailed information about the publication requirements. Sometimes it will say, how many publications a year, what kind of publications they value and look for. At the time when I was applying for my position, I had a lot of chapters published. I had a lot of digital publications on my website. I had a book published. I had 2 books published actually, but I did not have a lot of qualitative research. And I started my job when it was a research 2 university. I may not have had gotten the job if it was a research 1 university because I didn't have a lot of qualitative research experience, which I now have because I had a lot of great mentorship and support in my position, and I learned a lot about qualitative research, and now I am getting pretty good at it, actually. The third is understanding your service responsibilities. We saw in the NC State job call and in the Southwestern Oklahoma job call that there are expectations for advising and for departmental duties, and some leadership roles at the school. So that's service responsibilities. Those things don't have like hours in a day that they say you have to spend 3 hours or 4 hours. Some of those writing reports and attending meetings can really add up, and you want to know exactly what they're expecting from you. The next is the institutional fit. So you want to consider the mission and values of the institution. We did not spend time today reading what those are, but you want to read them. You want to maybe talk to the other professors and faculty in that department. You might know them. Like, you go to the website, look up the people, find out what they're studying, what they're researching, what they teach. Maybe you've met them at the National Council of Teachers of English or whatever professional organization you attend, and you're saying, yeah, I like these people. I like I like how they work. They're kind, compassionate human beings. Is that a good institutional and cultural fit for you? And then finally, if there's any support or resources, we saw on one of the job calls that there was professional development support, or of professional development. That likely means that you're going to get 1,000, 2,000, maybe more per year in order to spend on your conference travel, your registration for conferences, or other support structures like books, buying books or things like that too. Though I recommend just using your library and not buying a ton of books because you can check out a book for almost a year, all of those kinds of things. All right, so there's one more thing that we haven't really talked about yet, and it's like when to look for a job. Okay, so for this one, totally going to depend. But if you're in a traditional PhD program, and you've been funded as part of your PhD, you are likely thinking about or have been advised to think about applying for a job in your last year of the program. So if you think you're going to graduate in spring 2025, then you can start looking for a job now, fall 2024 or summer. These job openings are on the table now, the ones that we looked at. They probably have a cutoff period sometime around October. They also probably expect that you haven't defended your dissertation yet if you're still in a program, but that you likely will by the time the year is over and you'll be able to take that position. So these universities understand that. And hopefully you've been attending conferences and doing some publishing and have a little bit of writing under your belt already. So you're setting yourself up to be a great candidate for any of these teaching positions. So you can start applying, get your letters of recommendation, get your articles together if you want to share samples of writing, write your teaching philosophy statement, all of these kinds of things. You can get those in order and start applying, because what's going to happen is possibly at the National Council of Teachers of English, that happens in November, you might have a meetup with some of these people who are looking to fill their position. Or if you go to the elate meetings, conference meetings, or your professional organization meetings, people might announce job openings there. So they're, opening job calls in October, November, December. Sometimes they're going to be having a job call in January. But typically the jobs that we looked at right now, they're accepting applications through October. They're going to start doing interviews in November, December, and then going to get the hiring going. The people who have these job calls early are really looking for the best candidates, and they're going to try to sweep you up. One of the things that happened for me is I started applying, in the summer, I think, or September or something. And Oklahoma State, where I am now, they interviewed me in October. It was super early, where I thought, most people wouldn't be doing interviews until November, probably even after NCTE or something like that. It was super early. They were really moving quickly to make sure that they had good candidates for their job. And, I felt like I needed to make a decision pretty about taking that job. Good thing it was a good fit for me. But I didn't really have a interview in a lot of other places because they moved pretty quickly. So that's something to really think about. Now, if you are just like finished, you already have a job right now and you're just kind of like looking, then you can apply anytime a job pops open, and you can just like apply and see what happens. And you can decide whether or not you want to change jobs if you have a new job offer. Those kind of things can happen too. And here's the other thing. If you already have a job, especially if you're teaching K-12, or you have an instructor job or an adjunct job, and you're looking for a particular kind of job, or you can't relocate, well, the thing is, the perfect job, like NC State or Stanford, that is a teacher education, English language arts type thing, those only come up, maybe 2 or 3 a year, sometimes more a year, sometimes fewer in a year. So you might be ready to go on the job market and find a job this year, but there aren't as much options. There just don't happen to be a lot of options. That happen. So just, stay put until you find the right job that's a good fit for you. And then finally, I'll say that you can take a job that may not be the best fit, and then keep your eye on the market for another job that's going to come up, and then change when you need to. So really, there's so many things to think about with this. And I hope that some of the things that we've been talking about are helpful for you. Maybe you have additional questions, go ahead and put those in the comments and I'll get back to them. If this has been useful and maybe you want to check out my K-12 teaching video and the things that I would do differently if I started my tenure track position over again, that's another video that you can check out. And hit the subscribe, but also hit that bell thing so that you get a notice when a new video comes up. I'm trying to do this every Friday, so I hope that it's useful for you. This series, as I learn new things along my tenure track life, I want to give you some insights that hopefully will inform your decisions, or at least you won't feel so alone. And of course, you do not have to ask any questions because these videos are here and you can watch them anonymously. You don't have to feel like an imposter. You can watch that video too, imposter syndrome. But overall, I think the key takeaway is that you need to understand or think about what you're most passionate about. Is it teaching? Is it research? Is it service? Do you want to be at a big school where there is a research agenda, or a smaller school where there's lots of focus on teaching? The great thing is you can change your mind. You can try it one way and then look for another job and try it another way to find out what's a good fit for you so that you can keep your teaching life alive and find joy in the things that you're doing. So thanks for being with us, and until next time, see ya.